This is what US President Joe Biden had said about his Russian counterpart, Vladimir Putin. How much the West has been quote-unquote intimidated is for the world to see. Now, the United States is thinking of sheer hypocrisy. On one hand, it wants to give unequivocal support to Ukraine and provide whatever Kyiv needs. And when it realizes its own arms inventory is fast depleting, it is engaging in secret negotiation talks with Russia. On one hand, it wants to crush the Russian economy with sanctions. But on the other, the Biden administration wants its banks to continue operating in Moscow. The Joe Biden administration in its latest decision has asked several banks to keep minimum ties with Russia. Bloomberg reported on Tuesday that the US Treasury has asked large banks like JP Morgan and Citibank to continue providing services to some Russian firms strategically. But why would the US want to do this at a time when it is penalizing Moscow? You see, the US is very well aware of the global economy. One step wrong and the whole world's economy will be in jeopardy. Just for context, the US economy itself isn't in great shape either. It is on the brink of a recession, with inflation and cost of living going through the roof. Back to the banks. President Joe Biden wants these banks to walk a very tight rope and look at the finer details of the sanctions. Bloomberg quoted sources who said US officials asked these banks to keep basic services like US dollar settlement, payment transfers, and trade finance offerings going. But this will be only for those Russian companies who are exempted from certain aspects of the sanctions, such as Gazprom. Not just this, these banks will also be penalized billions of dollars in case they end up dealing with sanctioned entities. For the US, the aim is to not fund Putin's war on Ukraine directly. But here's the question: are banks even up for this? Banks in the United States are in a mess. Take Citibank for instance. Along with rivals Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan, it had decided to scale down operations in Russia even before the war in Ukraine began. Citigroup has an exposure of nearly $10 billion in Russia, the most of any US bank, and had previously warned it could lose nearly half of that in the worst case scenario. But all of this is not straightforward. US banks can't just pull out from Russia. Firstly, it's a huge market, and obtaining a license is a lengthy procedure. Once these banks get it, they aren't keen on giving that up, whatever the circumstance may be. And when it comes to matters such as this, banks are at the mercy of the government. Like Jamie Dimon, who was quizzed during a congressional hearing in September, when asked about severing ties with Russia, said, "We are following the instructions of the American government as they asked us to do it." So here is where we are at. Banks can't withdraw from Russia currently because it may not be viable from a business point of view. On the other hand, the Biden administration wants these banks to still stay there and conduct minimum business. Politically, the US president has been called out for his double standards. Congress leaders are of the view that President Biden should walk the talk when he talks of penalizing Russia. Such secretive measures aren't going to help the US's cause. After its sanctions boomeranged, do you think the US has exposed itself on its stance?